Welcome to a special edition of Bloomberg Technology, Tensions and Turning Points. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Over the next half hour, we will cover the promise of a country as it begins to reopen its economy following COVID-19 lockdowns, only to be met head-on by the ugly realities of racism and inequality in the United States. On a Minneapolis street on Memorial Day, George Floyd, an unarmed African-American man, took his last breath and died at the hands of 4 Minneapolis police officers. Nearly 9 minutes of Floyd's final moments were captured on bystander videos and quickly spread on social media. Less than 3 weeks later, another black man, Rayshard Brooks, is killed by law enforcement in Atlanta, fatally shot while fleeing 2 white police officers in a restaurant parking lot. Again, clips of the confrontation go viral. The events and others like them have unleashed decades, if not centuries worth of tensions, giving rise to civil unrest and calls for societal and systemic change. Day by day, Bloomberg Technology has spoken to prominent civil rights activists and lawmakers, leaders in the entertainment industry, African-American tech CEOs and investors, all sharing painful perspectives.
I think we've just been in a constant state of trauma. And definitely have been feeling it both as a human and then just watching this ecosystem feel it as well.
The message needs to be loud and clear that the kind of killing that took place of George Floyd at the hands of 4 Minneapolis police officers has to stop.
These things happen not just because of the event of a tragic death, but because there is a brewing frustration among African Americans that they are not living the full extent of the American dream.
I think the thing that is important for people to know is just how frequent these things are. You hear the once every few months about the horrific killing, and I think sometimes are numb to it. But it's really a daily, weekly, yearly, decade after decade thing that's happened. I myself have been, handcuffed or been, had a gun pointed at me by police 4 times in my life. Yet have never been charged with a crime or even arrested.
It's an opportunity for America to realize the great inequalities and the vast inaccessibility that happens and has occurred, and then a great opportunity in the same breath to reimagine a future where we include more people of color, including myself as a founder of color, to create things that can vastly impact a lot of the inequalities that we are seeing today.
The speed at which social media adds momentum to movements, for better and for worse, has not been lost. The debate over how to handle posts by President Trump pitting Twitter against Facebook. Twitter adding a fact-checking feature to the president's tweets on mail-in voting and hiding this tweet behind a warning. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. Early Facebook investor and Elevation Partners Roger McNamee called Twitter's move courageous.
Trump has been so good for Twitter's business that the notion that, that Twitter would do anything to slow him down, that required courage. Remember, that was a public safety warning they put on the shooters and looters tweet. Right? Because it was threatening violence. It was encouraging violence. And that, it seems to me, is not a free speech issue at all. That's the equivalent of screaming fire in a crowded theater.
But Facebook left the same post by the president untouched. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg saying he doesn't want the social network to be the arbiter of truth.
I think Mark's decision was wrong. I have spoken to people at Facebook high up, for a great deal of time, and I've seen people try with them. There are some really amazing people at Facebook, and they're speaking out now, and even more so are not speaking out, but I think they will.
The company spends a lot of time outlining standards, they call them community standards, that they're supposed to enforce against all of their users. And then when one particular user comes along who happens to send his posts from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, there seems to be a very different standard.
In a lot of ways, Facebook is too big to fix right now. Facebook has 2.5 billion users around the world, constantly posting in more than 100 languages. That's a system that's too big to govern.
You have one young white man who has one experience in this life, who has the control of billions of people, like what they see and what they view, it is wrong. And I don't know if he's drunk with power or if he's simply just in a bubble.
I think Mark is very fixated on power. I think he really has a vision that his platform is going to replace governments in many contexts.
I think both Twitter and Facebook need to take a long, hard look at what they've created, and the monster they created in terms of business may come back to bite them in terms of just ideology about what is in the best interest of the American people.
I think Twitter is taking the more stance as being a service for the people and saying that they then have a responsibility to make sure that the service is used in a certain way. Facebook is, much larger. They really view themselves as a utility. Facebook almost wants to consider themselves as the internet or as an extension of the internet itself. And in that case, they want to take no responsibility for how that utility is then used. And so I think it's a difference in philosophy.
That difference in philosophy has led to, quote, disappointment among many civil rights leaders in Facebook. Vanita Gupta, head of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, spoke to us after a phone call with Zuckerberg himself.
We told Mark that those tweets and those posts that the president made actually violated the four corners of their voter suppression policy that's on the books, a policy that we had helped create but actually thought was insufficient and had been working to strengthen. But even on the policy that they have, those tweets violated them. And on the looters and shooters comment that it violated their policy against incitement to violence. And he disagreed and doubled down on that decision and tried to explain his reasoning. But to us, his reasoning made no sense and actually betrayed a lack of understanding about existing voting rules, the state of voting litigation around the country, and the like. And I think showed why we think it's so important for Mark to have the right people in the room, have civil rights expertise in the room when he was making these decisions.
Zuckerberg committed to reviewing Facebook's content policies, while President Trump himself ventured further into the fray. In late May, the president signed an executive order seeking to hold tech platforms like Twitter and Facebook accountable for how they moderate their content by challenging Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which protects websites from liability for content their users create. The Center for Democracy and Technology was the first to sue the president in return.
So what we're most worried about is that this EO is designed to deter social media companies from fighting misinformation, voter suppression, and stoking violence on their services. And what we're most worried about is that it's doing that during an election year. We are very concerned there's a wide public conversation around the power of social media, around the significant volume of conversations that happens on information platforms. And that allows really robust and important speech, but it also allows disinformation and misinformation to spread. We are very anxious about any executive order that is trying to coerce social media companies that are trying to take responsible actions to inform users to flag content which raises those types of concerns.
Coming up, Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg on reopening Menlo Park, Shopify CEO Tobias Lutka on working from home, perhaps forever, and Stitch Fix's Katrina Lake on recent layoffs. Silicon Valley's strategies for keeping workers safe and businesses running next. You're watching Bloomberg Technology, Tensions and Turning Points. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to a special edition of Bloomberg Technology, Tensions and Turning Points. I'm Emily Chang. First, it was a health crisis, then an economic crisis. Now, Silicon Valley is dealing with a deep-seated social crisis tied to racism and inequality. In some cases, businesses are building bridges.
A diverse team drives higher revenue, it drives more innovation, decisions are made faster, and ultimately drives better returns.
In other cases, businesses are cutting ties to take a stand. Talkspace CEO Oren Frank recently pulled out of a lucrative deal with Facebook.
As a CEO of a mental health company, I know for a fact that social media in general is harmful for our mental health. I know that Facebook and other platforms know that. And in this time when Black Americans are being killed on the streets and the levels of agitation and incitement to violence and hate and lies are so high, the decision of Facebook to say, we do not take responsibility, we're not going to curate, we're not going to fact check, amounts to saying we are willing to harm our users. It's as simple as that.
Then there's the question of how and when to bring employees back to work. Apple started welcoming select workers back to its main campus June 15th, while Twitter and Square are allowing workers to stay remote permanently. Google and Facebook have said most staff will be working from home through at least the end of the year. We spoke to Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg.
We're trying to keep our employees safe. We were one of the first companies to go in. We've already said we're going to be one of the last companies to go back because we're going to make way for essential workers and healthline workers, keep it as safe as possible for them. And we want to put products into the world that help. And some of those are surprising. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, we launched fundraisers for small businesses. You know, we've had fundraisers for nonprofits and fundraisers for people for a long time. But if you had asked a few months ago, would we launch fundraisers for small business? We never would have thought of it. But people want to help keep their local businesses alive. And so we launched fundraisers. Our focus is taking all of the great people we have at Facebook who are working hard through this and trying to put products out there that help people stay connected and help small businesses survive through this crisis.
As you said, Facebook has already told employees that they can expect to work from home through the end of the year. I'm curious how you're thinking about the return to work. Like, is it only going to be safe when there's a vaccine? And when this happens, how does the office actually look different?
Well, we're going to follow health guidelines. And obviously, this is a situation that's changing as people learn more. Here's what we know. We know we're trying to keep our essential workers, which is a very small percentage of our team, as safe as possible. That means keeping everyone else home. We know we're going to follow very conservative guidelines on what kind of space people need. And we also know that we're going to continue to learn. I do think if you had asked a lot of us, could we do our jobs from home months ago, we would have said no. And it has been, you know, we are lucky that we can work from home, but it's been pleasantly surprising how much we can get done. And so I do think it's going to change all of our understanding about what has to be done in person. And that change is probably something that won't go back even after there is hopefully soon a vaccine, a cure, a treatment.
Software messaging platform Slack has seen a surge in business with so many workers at home. Here's how CEO Stuart Butterfield is thinking about a return to the office for his own employees.
I can't imagine going back to normal. I think we'll absolutely have a much higher percentage of people working remotely. What we've seen the demand for is actually kind of interesting. What people want is flexibility. So I like coming into the office sometimes. I don't love my commute, so I want to be able to come in 2 days a week. Or maybe we get together for on-sites or planning sessions to kind of come up with a plan, and then when we have just work to do, we stay home. It's too soon to know how that will work. What we said was they're definitely not going to open before September, and I think we're likely to extend that further. I can't imagine opening offices on a very limited basis for those employees who would prefer to work there just because they're going crazy inside their house or they don't really have the facilities in their home. But going back to normal, I don't know if we ever will, and certainly it's not going to be soon.
Then there's Ottawa-based Shopify, helping 1 million merchants sell online. Founder and CEO Tobias Lutka told us the company's 5,000 workers can also work from home indefinitely.
I do think we are seeing the end of office centricity. It used to be that the office was a place where work is being done, and being remote really meant you are like using some digital crutch to be basically in the office so that you can get work done. I think what COVID is going to accelerate is something which would have happened anyways, but would have happened many years from now, which is that really everyone rearranges their understanding of that at least for the companies that can do it, all the work is really digital by default. I think, so we will not like we expect that the majority of people will work from home and home offices in the future. We also expect
So what percentage of people would still be in the office on a regular basis?
I would say it's 20-25%, something like
really?
This. I think that there's a lot of, I come across a lot of people who say, I can't wait for this whole thing to be over because I really would like to go back to the office. I don't think there's a going back to the office the way we had. I think we will go back to something different, potentially better in some ways and potentially in some instances also worse than it might have been. And I think the first time, if we would all wake up tomorrow and saying, okay, this is back to normal time, I think we would get basically as far as the elevator banks to say, it doesn't feel right. And so I don't actually think that the demand will be there to go back in the way that people might expect.
But we can't paint an accurate jobs picture without mentioning layoffs. Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb all laying off thousands of employees, along with online style giant Stitch Fix. CEO Katrina Lake telling us it's been painful, but also unavoidable.
No, this was, an incredibly difficult decision. And it's really hard for all the stylists who are impacted. It's really hard for our team in general. The 1,400 part-time stylists in California was a very committed and talented group of people, and we couldn't have built the business without them. But really, our intention is to relocate as many of those stylists as we can. For a few hundred of those stylists, that decision was immediate, but actually the majority of those stylists are with us until September. And what that gives people a chance to do is to give a chance to think about something like relocation, or gives a chance to think about what's next for them, and to be able to give people as much time as possible, knowing that this is a challenging time, was an important part of what we did here. The reality, though, in terms of the reason we had to make this decision, was really around the cost of operating in California, and the complexity of operating in California is really challenging. And we have many, many talented stylists that are outside of California, and we know that there's an opportunity to create the 1,400 jobs and then some. We are actually planning to hire 2,000 stylists outside of the region. And so, it was a really, really difficult decision to make. But at the end of the day, this was the decision that we had to make, I think, as we think about how to create the opportunity to invest against the future, and in the long term to really create a company that can have as much of an impact and create as much jobs as we can in the long term.
Meantime, Disney slowly reopening its parks around the world, from Shanghai to Hong Kong and Orlando, Florida, come July. We spoke to Disney CEO Bob Chapek.
We always said we would not open up again until we thought we could do so responsibly. We've got some learnings from Shanghai. We've got some learnings from our own Disney Springs retail and dining area that we opened up just a week ago. And we've been able to make some learnings in terms of how you keep that social distancing. That is the key for us, keeping that 6 feet social distancing, no matter whether people in restaurants, whether on Main Street, or whether they're in attractions. And we're confident that we can do that and open up responsibly.
That said, Universal is planning to open up June 5th. Why a month later?
Well, for us, we feel that this is the right time for us in July. We've got a different situation, frankly, than Universal does, because we're much bigger. We have a much more complex business. We've got a different labor situation. And at the same time, we're also going to be implementing a new reservation system for our guests. And it's going to take some time to take the millions of reservations that we've already got on the books and then switch that over to a new reservation system. So we think July is the right time for us.
Coming up, science and technology will play a crucial role in helping the economy reopen safely. From studies connecting blood type to COVID-19 to vaccine development and contact tracing, we'll hear from 23andMe's Anne Wojcicki and Cambridge Analytica whistleblower Brittany Kaiser. This is a special edition of Bloomberg Technology, Tensions and Turning Points. This is Bloomberg. Special edition of Bloomberg Technology, Tensions and Turning Points. As the biggest tech and media companies plan to reopen stores, campuses, and theme parks, safety remains the top priority. Of course, one turning point would be a vaccine for COVID-19, and the race to develop it is on. Biotech firm Novavax says if it happens before the end of the year, then it has to be scaled.
We want to deliver millions of doses, and in fact, I think we could deliver 100 million doses by the end of the year, more than 1 billion doses next year, and that's what's needed.
Meantime, there are countless studies ongoing to better understand the science of COVID-19. 23andMe surveyed 750,000 customers, more than 12,000 of whom got sick. They found a fascinating connection to blood type.
We found that the O blood type actually looks like it's protective. It's not a huge increase in protectivity, but it's 9 to 18% less likely to be infected and be severe. So it's an important step. And I want to emphasize, there's more research to be found here, which is part of the reason why we're still enrolling people in this study. We are offered, we're giving away 10,000 kits for anybody who has been hospitalized, who had COVID-19, in part because I really believe we have the potential to find, genetic associations that will help us know who's the most vulnerable, and then can we do more to potentially protect those people.
So it's obviously good news if you're type O, and I know it is very early, but have you found any clues, showcasing any trends for other blood types? I mean, anything preliminary?
It looks like the other blood types, again, O looks like you have a decreased risk, and the others all look relatively similar. So the important thing with biology and science is first trying to understand why is it that O looks like it's potentially protective in some ways, or you have less of a risk. So understanding that biology, and then will that help translate into, a genetic test that would help be able to identify people to say, hey, you should really be more protective, or help in vaccine discovery or in drug discovery in any way.
Then there's the technology of tracking the spread. Enter contact tracing, using data to follow the path of the disease, which has surged in parts of Asia and Europe. Despite an unprecedented partnership between Apple and Google, the U.S. is still behind. Here's Brittany Kaiser, data rights activist and Cambridge Analytica whistleblower.
The main problem is that many of the big companies and governments that are implementing contact tracing apps don't have a great history of respecting data protection and privacy, and the governments that are encouraging people to opt into these apps have not implemented data protection legislation or regulation that will protect citizens' privacy and how their data is going to be used.
From data privacy to health concerns to systemic inequality, technology will continue to play a role in confronting these challenges, but also offers us hope. On May 30th, SpaceX launched its first ever rocket carrying humans into space. NASA's administrator said that while times are tough, the launch was an opportunity to reflect on humanity and what we can do when we work together. That's it for this special edition of Bloomberg Technology, Tensions and Turning Points. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.
So rises a new era of American spaceflight, and with it the ambitions of a new generation continuing the dream.
T plus 30 seconds into this historic mission. Flying crew on board Dragon and Falcon 9, and look at them go.
Falcon power telemetry nominal.